In every violence you see, there's an underlying conflict. There's a reason why you have violence. And then we have the primitive theory that's because they are evil people on the other side, but we are not. We are good people. This is bullshit. I mean, come on. So what you do is you look at Ukraine and then you say, pump in more weapons. That's people who are illiterate. Because if you want to solve the problem, you see the symptoms of it is to ask, what is the underlying conflict? And every conflict, Pascal, is not located in you or me. It's located between us. It's a problem that stands between parties who do not know how to deal with it. And then they end up using violence instead of saying things like, let's hire a mediator, let's go to the UN, let's take it to an arbitration, or let's sit down and talk about our problem.
Hello everybody, this is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking again to Dr. Jan Oberg, a Danish peace researcher in Sweden. Today we want to talk about the escalating rhetoric toward Russia in Europe and what peace-oriented folks can do about it. Jan, welcome back.
Thank you so much, Pascal. I'm glad to be here again.
I'm glad you agreed to what we said. We want to make a positive talk about what can be done and what should be, instead of constantly complaining about how bad things are. Because, I mean, let's be honest, it is a frustrating moment in time, and it is getting more frustrating if we see how politics, especially in Europe, is developing. But complaining about it won't get us out of the problem. Can you please tell us what a peace researcher tries to frame an unpeaceful environment?
Thank you so much for that approach to it. One of my mentors in peace research, I'm a sociologist, but I got in the 70s into peace research, peace and conflict studies, which was a relatively new academic discipline at the time. The first institute was set up by Johan Galtung in Oslo, I think, in 1957. And you had the Journal of Peace Research and stuff. Not to get into that, but Johan always emphasized that social science, and he was a sociologist too, and a mathematician. Social science is about connecting three things: D, T, and V. And D is data, T is theories, and V is values. So when you do academic work, investigate a thing, you do empirical research. What are the facts based on your connection between theories and data? Now you find out that when you investigate something and you come to a conclusion that this theory explains it, then you may also say, I need to criticize it because the world is not good enough, right? And criticism is the connection of the T and the V. And that's what most people do. It's a Marxist tradition. It is what most geopolitical commentators and media do. We criticize things, and that's perfectly all right. But what we are lacking desperately, particularly in times of crisis, is to connect the D and the V, namely, the world is not good enough. We have criticized it. We know it's not, and we know why it is not. And then comes the question, what can be done about it? What should have been done? What can still be done about it? And it was no coincidence that Johan Galtung thought of things that way because his father was a doctor. And so at the dinner table at home, they always talked about diagnosis, prognosis, and treatment. And it's a treatment part that I think is lacking basically everywhere. If you go to Gandhi, it's a constructive program. He was not just against the British and the occupation and colonialism. He was for a particular India that he wanted to realize. And I would like to quote the queen of peace research, Elise Bowling, who always said, you will never see people working for something if they cannot imagine it. And that's why I would maybe provocatively for some say we have no peace movement. You have small groups here and there who work with nonviolence and alternatives, but what we call the peace movement is an anti-militarist, anti-war, anti-weapons, anti-nuclear. And to be anti-something is not to be for peace. For peace and being anti-war is two different things. And so I believe that we have to have more positive energy. We have to gather our creative energies, look into history and look into potential futures, possible futures. In my view, peace is utterly possible. And I think we should discuss how that could be done. You may also go back to a quotation I have used, I think also with you before, George Bernard Shaw. Most people look at the world as it is and ask why. What we ought to do, or more ought to do, is to look at the world as it could be and ask why not. And I would add to, or paraphrase it to, and say what can be done. That was what I would have put in there if I'd been George Bernard Shaw, but I was not. So this idea of only criticizing, has another dimension. That's my final point to your question, is if we only criticize, we talk about the present and the past. We don't talk about the future. And the West today is a system with no future and no future thinking. I'm old enough to remember then you had people like Robert Jung in Austria. You had people who did forecasting. You had limits to growth groups. You Club of Rome. You had those who thought about, what will happen if we do this and what will happen if we do that. And where should we go now? Should we move? In the 80s, we had the whole discussion of a new international economic order. That was a vision for the whole world, basically the third world at the time, we called it that. But there's no vision today, and you cannot have peace if you don't have a vision of peace. You cannot paint a painting if you don't have a vision, a rough vision when you start going, a sketch or something, of where you want what you want that picture to look like. So everything, I would say, not criticizing what is happening. What I'm saying is it's necessary, but not sufficient to analyze the world and criticize the world. You need to do what a doctor does also if you're a social scientist, a political scientist, or something like that. That's the kind of thing I'm going for.
Two things. I agree wholeheartedly that we should have positive visions, but I want to ask you for your opinion on two things. What about the dangers of using values as a motivation for intellectual criticism and intellectual work? Because we had moments where intellectuals did become pivotal in sketching out a future. I mean, Marxism, the Marxist approach at analysis that then also fed into, in the end, the Russian Revolution, right? And those were very important, like, academic contributions, right? And Marxism still today is an important framework to understand the national and international world. We had, the French Revolution was also built partially on very strong social criticism and a vision of the future. But turns out that vision even included people who said, for intellectual purposes, things like terrorism, state terrorism, are necessary in order to get to the good society. So there are dangers of mass violence also inside like intellectual and value-based approaches to doing academics. And the second thing then would be, what do you say to people who argue that no, the academic endeavor, sociologist endeavor, must be neutral, and we are just observers and we just tell people how the world works, but we do not engage ourselves, because otherwise we become politicians, we become activists, and once you're an activist, you're not really neutral or abstract anymore. You have a mission, and you will confirmation bias your own research.
Well, it's basically two aspects of the same question, I suppose. Yeah. The role of values in social science. I am totally sure that as human beings, we have values, and the best you can do is what the old Swedish economist Gunnar Myrdal said: be aware of them and state them.
Yeah.
Don't tell us that you're objective and you're neutral and all that, because when you deal with society, you are not neutral. You are part of that society. And I would say that if you make it clear, I mean, what's wrong with activism? Research that is just la pour la, ivory tower thinking, written for the closest 5 colleagues and ending up in a university library. Taxpayers have paid my education. I'm here to do something good for society. And I don't see, if I state clearly that I am for nonviolent conflict resolution, you take the whole United Nations Charter. It's full of values. Article 1 says that peace shall be established by peaceful means. That's just a value. It doesn't say we should do it by means of weapons and armament and nuclear weapons. And so I, as a peace researcher, and I think you cannot call yourself a peace researcher if you argue for the existence of more and more weapons and nuclear arms in particular. I'm for nonviolence. I'm for the principle, and which is a value statement or a theory, whatever, philosophy, whatever you call it. We must have tried all kinds of things first with nonviolent negotiations, and maybe sanctions, although they can be violent too. Mediation, whatever word you put on it, before we, as last resort, comes to use weapons in the name of the global collectivity. That's a value built into the United Nations Charter. Chapter 7, when everything has been done, shown to be against an aggressor, let's say, when that has happened, then we can, in the name of the UN and the world community, do something about the bad guy who's destroying the community. And I think that's a value statement. That's a theory. That's a philosophy. And I stand for that. The question is, if people are, arguing for, even without any intellectual analysis or anything, saying that Russia is a big threat in Europe today, or China is coming up as our main enemy or something like that, they get away with that, which is value statement also. They have no basis in facts or analysis. They get away with that and get media attention. But when you and I say we could solve this problem with nonviolent means, people say, oh, that's a little bit unrealistic, isn't it? Ha, 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 how naive are you? That's when I want to crush nonviolently. There are tons of tools that we could use to create a better world, which is not talked about, which are never mentioned in the media, and journalists and others don't even know how to ask a question about. And there's a reservoir of betterment possible for humanity that is never talked about. And all these geopolitical analyses that only talk about what Trump said yesterday, etc. The problem is that Trump is setting the agenda. You're only reacting to what is happening, where I would say everybody who wants a better world should set the agenda and force these politicians, non-violently again, by the word of the pen or the videos or whatever, should force these people to answer our agenda. As long as Trump is the most quoted person on this earth, nothing will change for the better. Ignore him. Not always, but ignore him. He's getting too much attention, and he knows how to get that attention. And all the geopolitical commentators are people who then say, oh, Trump said that was not very wise of him, or this will be dangerous, or this will be that. But they never come to the question, what should the American president have said? What would make the world a better place? What can we do as human beings? I mean, think of Western civilization, which is now in deep crisis and falling apart. Think of what we have done in terms of literature, philosophy, good thinking, political models, party, visions, ideologies, art, music. Are you telling me that we don't have, I'm sorry, you're not telling me, but you see what I mean? That's a phrase. Should we believe that all this is without any value today in a situation where this culture, this civilization is in crisis, and we say, we have to just fall apart. We just have to militarize ourselves to death. That's the only thing we can do. I think we have a huge reservoir of knowledge, experience, and wonderful and beautiful ideas that could be applied today. But the connection between that and the terrible situation we're in is never made.
Yeah, and there's myriads of small things that can be done, like organizing peace clubs, book clubs, organizing student exchanges, organizing city sisterships, again with the Russians, with the Chinese, like people-to-people exchanges. There's a lot of things that people can or could work on, but that the system tries to prevent us from actually doing. Part of that is, of course, the demonization of the other, but the, the perverse thing is that those colleagues, friends, family members who are part of the system that rips societies apart, and I speak of like world society apart, are maybe, and I would argue actually often not aware of the fact that that's what they're doing. That, when this very perverse logic that Jens Stoltenberg boiled down to its core when he said bombs are the way to peace, weapons are the way to peace. It means that there's a significant number of people in society who believe that this time we need the weapons, and weapons are actually the way to achieve peace. How and I do believe there's people who fall for this, but then there's people who know that it is BS and that it is just marketing in order to get mass support for a militaristic policy. How do we tell this apart, and how do we also reconvince the people who unfortunately swallowed that pill to spit it out again?
I mean, these are not easy questions, Pascal, and they're good you're raising them. But I'm of the opinion that we should go against this. We should, of course, when Jens Stoltenberg says these things, we should start our articles saying this has nothing to do with empirical reality. This is propaganda. The man doesn't know and cannot read books, obviously, and things like that. But you spend only 25% of your intellectual time on denouncing and criticizing that. And then you spend the rest of your time saying, why is it wrong and what actually applies? Namely, that peaceful means lead to peace. And where does that come from? It comes from Gandhian thinking that the means are the goals in the making. Just such a formulation should make people think if they have the slightest intellectual capacity. The means we choose are the goals in the making. Don't have big goals, just do the right thing every day, and then you will get to the good goal. And that's what we don't do by using weapons. There's no way that Ukraine or any other conflict will be solved because we don't look in that case at the underlying conflict. We look at the battlefield. And all these intellectual kakistocrats, kakistocracy means government by the least able and the least good people. That's what we are running now with the militarism, because they can't think. They can't think of anything about beyond their own black box in which they're sitting with a tiny window up there. Groupthink is terribly dangerous. That we should spend, we who are for peace should spend the majority of our time and energy on positive energy, disseminating. So people say, yeah, why the hell don't we talk about that? Why have nobody mentioned that? You know, one thing, politicians don't care about criticism. They are used to being criticized by media, by our colleagues, by you and me, whatever. But if somebody comes up and say, hey, this is what the world could look like, why don't we go this direction? You will make people think. And what politicians are very afraid of are better ideas than their own. And I tell you, if you study peace for 3 months, you will have better idea about peace than any politician today.
And what's the way to implement it? Because we have this problem, right? So we are a society. We're made out of these different elements, and each one of us, we still have to do work. And once we switch off the YouTube for today, we either have to make food, pick up the kids, or go to work, or do all of the above and be like an overworked mom. Poor overworked moms. There's no category that I have more of humans that I have more respect for than overworked moms. The second category then is overworked dads. they have it really hard. But so what's the connections, right? Because we have politicians, because we outsource politics to them, right? And then we give them a mandate, and then we expect them to make it their profession to somehow work in concert to improve things. Now, but we are currently in Europe at a point where that isn't at least it's not working well enough. We have parties that try to go in a certain direction, but overall we're running towards the abyss. And each one of us, once we switch off the YouTube feed for today, what's the best course of action, or the best way of thinking in order to get into a course of action to then lead to positive streaming of our energies?
I would say it's the two questions everybody can ask themselves. What am I fearful of? And what do I want instead? Just do both. Don't sit down just and think when you've seen the primetime television or you've seen your YouTube feed or whatever, oh my God, the world is going to hell. When you are there and you think that those in power have gotten you, then you are caught. Then you are in the trap, because the trap of politics today is to make people believe that there's no alternative, for instance, to armament and militarism in Europe. And that's what we should invest more in than anything else. Those types of false theories can be looked through. People are not stupid. Come on. They may be overburdened, as you say. They may be tired when they come home from work, etc. But anybody can sit down and say, what kind of world would I look like? But we are prevented from that because we are told it's going to hell. And that's where I would say we have some cynics and we have some alarmists. But the system lives from the Tina complex. There is no alternative to what we say now as elites. And I would say there are only alternatives. And the moment you have seen that there are only alternatives to war, armament, and whatever, because it will end bad, of course, at some point, then free your mind or your thinking, and allow yourself to be positive in the sense, not only what do I fear, even what do I perhaps think will happen, but what kind of world would I like to see, big and small, and how can I take the first step together with my family, my friends, my little group, or whatever it is? All big movements have always begun with small groups, doing something, thinking new thoughts. And I believe in the power of good ideas. I mean, that's where the superstructure, to speak Marxist, is much more important. Ideas are much more important, in my view, than material stuff and rewards. But what you're pointing to, and I'd like to say just a few words about that, is dependent intellectuals. They won't help us. If you sit in a state institute financed by the government, you don't criticize that government. That has stopped long ago. The reason I can say what I do is that we are not financed by any corporation and not financed by any government at the Transnational Foundation here. We are people financed. And people obviously like what we do and say because they support us in what we do and say. So long story short is, you've got to be sure that you free your mind, you free your research, you free your space to say, I refuse to accept the terror that is inbuilt in telling us that the only way to go now is more warfare and armament and nuclear weapons. It's a liberation. It's a peace liberation of your mind to begin with, and then inaction. And that's what I think we should address the question of cynics. Cynics are the people who say, oh, no matter how good an organization is, it was always created to help the United States dominate the world. I mean, you see people now, when I speak about reforms of the UN, who under the YouTube video say something like, oh, it was never meant to be anything of a serious organization. Just to pull it down, it's useless. You know, those are the cynics who are damn dangerous, because they are putting more power in the hands of those who have destroyed the UN so far. And the UN is a terrible, important, non-violent. It's the most Gandhian document ever signed the most Gandhian document ever signed by governments. And we need to make it much more democratic and discuss how can we make the United Nations and other organizations much more powerful, right? And secondly, we have the alarmists. And I have an increasing psychological, political problem, moral problem with these people who say that we are approaching a third world war and it will be nuclear holocaust for us all and the world will be gone. Excuse me, how the hell do they know that? How do they know that? We have had nuclear weapons used one time. How do they know at what time we will have some countries shooting at each other seriously in a larger war, How do they know that that will lead to tactical nuclear weapons being used and then strategic nuclear weapons and we will all be gone? What they are doing is nothing scientific. They are promoting, they're letting off the psychological frustrations they have themselves, in my view. They're not serious. They're not serious scientists who do. And then the final thing about that is they cause, by those doomsday preachings, they cause people to give up. It is the worst thing you can do to humanity is to tell them that there's no hope and there's only nuclear weapons in front of us and we will all be dead, if this and that continues 2 more weeks, right? Never ever say that. One, because it's unserious, not serious from a scientific point of view, a scholarly point of view. Two, you're destroying people's hopes. And if you destroy hopes, you destroy their ability to do something. They sit down and give up. And that is, in my view, a crime. It's a moral crime. It's a scholarly crime to take away people's wish and hopes for a better world and for a better world for their children. That is our damn duty as intellectuals, not to go and indirectly by alarmism and cynicism support the militarists and the if you will, the destroyers at the moment. There are alternatives to that, and there are only alternatives to that.
And
things could be thought in completely different ways. Defensive defense, we can easily create a world without nuclear weapons. It's not, I mean, I'm sorry, we can easily think out what it would look like. And then when you know what it looks like, you have an idea, you've had a democratic decision about it, then it will be implementable. There's no doubt that if you have a good idea and you have enough millions of people who want it, it can be implemented. But it can't be implemented by following or discussing only what Jens Stoltenberg is saying.
And just to underscore that, I mean, we have a lot of historical moments when we actually did manage to implement good ideas. The INF Treaty, the whole new arms control treaties that we had toward the end of the Cold War and then in the 1990s, those were complicated treaties with mechanisms, with control mechanisms, and they worked. They worked while they worked, and then it was a political decision to give them up. But they worked while they worked, and we have people like Scott Ritter who tell us,
no, created a more secure Europe.
We had a more secure Europe. I mean, we had ways of de-escalating, and we did de-escalate, and we did actually reduce the number of nuclear warheads. All of that happened. I mean, it's absolutely not impossible. So, question is how to implement it, how to structure these agreements, who can be the people who do this. But I mean, we intellectuals or anyone out there actually can participate in that enterprise and also in the discussion about it, because it has never been cheaper and never been easier to speak your mind these days and find a place to actually put ideas and thoughts and exchange. So all of these tools are today readily available, luckily. And maybe one more point I just want to underscore. I agree with you. I just want to add that if there's a fire, I do not oppose to people yelling there's a fire. But if they then also yell and we're locked in and there's no water, and it's over, then we have a problem, right? So the people who yell there's a fire also need to tell us how to put it out, right? And probably how to rebuild what the fire already destroyed. Otherwise, that's just not only half a job done, it creates panic, right? And we want to avoid panic.
Well, of course, I don't dispute what you're saying philosophically, but I think some people may be good at getting ideas, and some people might be good at devising strategies. It's not necessarily that everybody who has a good idea also know exactly how to implement it.
Right.
What I think we should let loose now, and what the world needs, is it's a critical mass, and that alludes to explosions, a critical mass of constructive thinking. Let the thousands of ideas about a better world bloom. For instance, one of the few good ideas there is a multipolar world, and the Belt and Road Initiative, and the future thinking of China.
I was about to say that.
That's not what I mean. I mean somebody who can say these ideas are creative, stimulating, and let's sit down with people who can do a strategy. They're not necessarily the same people. But what I'm saying is don't kill a good idea because you cannot immediately see how to implement it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Right. And we
The
have
good idea has a power in itself and it moves the mind. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the good news is also that good ideas tend to survive on their own. I mean, international law was not given to us by the hand of God or the
Exactly.
almighty
Yeah.
universe. It was something that that emerged out of the chaos of international relations because it is the good ideas that overwhelming majority says no, they are good ideas and we should follow them. We break them and they don't always work, but they're good ideas and they're around.
Yeah.
And it emerges out of the chaos and it's carried forward and nobody can kill it. So
Yeah.
how to positively contribute to such movements is the question, right? One of the reasons why I think people are quite hopeful, at least in our corner of the internet, when they talk about the multipolar world, is because they see that there are alternative ideas and ideas of what needs to be built in order to get there.
Something you can work for, not against. That's the psychology of it. Work for something. Peace, you have this simple distinction between negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace is when you stop a war. That's not peace, but it's a negative peace. You stop the violence, right? But the positive peace is how to realize human, social, psychological, and society's potential to create a better world. That is a vision. That is why do we talk so much about either utopia or dystopia? Utopia is a place you'll never get to. Dystopia is,
the place you never want to go to.
Hell. Mm-hmm. In between is something called utopia. Not EU, but it's spelled the same way, but it's not EU. Utopia is the vision that is realistic to realize. We never talk about that. We talk about utopia and dystopia. But the future thinking would tell you that there's something in between that is realistic. And that's one of the arguments you always hear. It's not realistic. Now, imagine you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you, I made a diagnosis and my prognosis is that you will die within a year because of your disease. Is it unrealistic to ask the man to come or the woman to come up with an idea about how you can be healed? I don't think so. I think it's part of the damn duty and intellect of a doctor. And I would see peace research and other social sciences as exactly the same. We should repair the world and go on. And we need future workshops. We need methodologies for meeting across boundaries and simply ask questions like, what would the good world look like? And when we have some ideas and we go for it. But that is this positive energy, this turning things upside down that most people don't get to because we are trained also at the universities to be critical students. Now, most students are not critical today, but I was when I was a student. Be critical, be critical. Nobody said, be constructive or think of how the world could be a better place. We didn't learn that. We got to do that ourselves. That's what the arts are doing. The arts are doing something that is much more interesting, actually, than science and politics. They are the artist, by definition, is oriented towards the future. A filmmaker has an idea about what that film will be and why, what role it will play in the future. Somebody who makes a fantastic painting, writes a good book, has always the future in mind, even if the book is about history. But the scientists have only in mind to criticize what happened yesterday. And that, to me, that's lousy science. I'm sorry. I'm probably offending some people. It's not my intention. But I said it's lousy science that has no solutions.
Anyone who feels offended after what you said probably deserves to be offended.
No, I don't want to offend people. That's a kind of violence too. I just say, to me, it's not good social science if it doesn't have an impact or a conclusion that leads to what can be done, particularly because we are sitting in a situation where we are in trouble. And I would like to raise the global, but also in particular, the Western qualities, values, theories, productions, art, and whatever, and bring that in to create a better world. We cannot do that by studying political science or geopolitics. I'm sorry, that's too limited.
Two thoughts. One is that especially in academia, some people don't understand the implications of what they're doing. There's certain studies where I really wonder if the person involved in it actually gets what that means. I had a colleague in a previous institute who studied whether the threat of eviction increases the likelihood of rents to be paid on time in Africa. Like, Jesus Christ, of course the answer to that one at the end of the empirical study is yes. And of course the answer to is this a bastard way of trying to approach the problem is also yes. It's a very, very cruel thing to ask in the beginning, but okay, fine. But the second thing is the what was the second thing I saw? I'm sorry, I lost myself there.
Could I just, while you think of that, could I answer your first thing here? You see, that is, I think, one of the diseases of social sciences has been you analyze the world and you criticize the world in the best of cases. But if you say what should be done, then you enter politics. And we're back to the first question you asked: what about the role of values? Peace research is a goal-oriented science, exactly like medicine. The purpose is to reduce violence to the body and violence to the world. And peace research that's why CIPRI and all the other places that call themselves peace research have nothing to do with it anymore. It's a systematic investigation of how to reduce violence. And when you come down to a very low level, how to realize potentials because you've gotten rid of violence. That is what peace is about. Peace research is about. Nobody's doing it. Nobody's doing it. Those who call themselves peace research are studying war. They're studying security. They're counting beans, They're seeing out, all kinds of things that has to do with warfare. And that is not peace studies. Peace is now a category that is tabooed, cancelled, thrown out for dissidents only in both politics, science, and the media. And I, as a peace researcher with 50 years of experience in this field, say, I'm not going to accept that. And if I cannot persuade others to do it, our little foundation will keep on doing peace research and peace politics, because any social science is politics too, if it's good.
Yeah, it's embedded in politics. And, this was is the second point that I wanted to ask you. Do you think that we should also start by questioning our own metaphors or the way that we approach these questions? Because what you've done from the beginning, and what I think is a useful step to do, is to reframe the problem away from, let's say, security issue into, let's call it, a medical issue. Let's use the language of medicine in order to look at what's wrong with the body of humanity, of this 8 billion of us. And maybe then we find smarter approaches. Maybe one of the reasons why we are more positive about a multipolar world is because we see that there's more to gain if we think about it as an equilibrium of different organs and so on. And then we can come up with ideas. Even my own neutrality, my little neutrality thing. And I keep telling people, look, I'm not neutral. I'm a neutralist, because I have a value which is like this peace value. And I do think we can use neutrality in order to.
It wouldn't be so nasty to point that out.
We can establish cordon sanitaire and so on. We could use this tool in order to make things a little bit better. Not perfect, but a little bit better. So what kind of metaphors do you think are the right ones in order for us to reframe this stuck system, which we often don't think of as a car or as a machine, actually? And so instead of that, what can we use?
A metaphor for it, I would say that's medicine. A metaphor for it is, you could call it vision.
Yeah. So, I mean,
the legitimacy of having visions and good ideas.
So,
because it's a political strategy to crush you and my ideas that are better. It's a political power struggle to say there are no alternatives. So I don't know what the metaphor would be, but it's a global peace revolution that starts with your mind and with your friends and with your family and with your like-minded people. And then we knock over the system at some point, because it cannot last forever. This militarism cannot last forever. even if it doesn't blow up in a war, which I don't think it will, it cannot last forever.
I do tend to think of war as a cancer, the phenomenon itself.
Yes, I agree with
and
you.
it feeds on the fact that these different cells interact with each other, right? And they interact in a way that's very, very, in the end, unhealthy for the entire body. Oh, so in that metaphor, how would you try to frame a healthy body? What's a healthy body like?
A healthy body, I suppose you mean the world body. I don't know.
Yeah, the body of humanity that is more or less peaceful.
I used to define peace very simply and very complex. Peace is to develop security and secure development for the whole human being and for all human beings. Peace is to develop security and secure development, because these are the two mechanisms. If we don't develop, we die. And if we don't have something that protects our development as humans, as society, against those who might want us to develop in another direction, or self-defense, in other words, then there is nothing to, no way you can be sure that we are here tomorrow also, right? And then comes this philosophical idea that I have from once having started new global ethics, something I did almost 40 years ago, actually, by the way, sitting in Japan, like you do. A global ethics has to do with getting rid of the Christian neighborhood ethics and look at, will my deeds be good or bad for the world? If everybody did the same as I do now, will that make a better world, or will it make a worse world? And so it has to do with the whole human being, and that's because the Western world is obsessed with the body, with physical materialism, etc. But we have spirituality and all that. That's a long story. And which has never been something on the agenda of the Western world, is it must apply to all human beings. It's not enough, you have this formulation that we are, whether it's Luther King or whoever it is, but there cannot be, I cannot have peace if there's no peace somewhere else, if there's a lack of peace somewhere else. So it is this holistic thinking that, the only society, Pascal, come on, that is relevant for humanity today is a global society. What the hell are we doing with nation states? It's a ridiculous construction. Get rid of it. It's outdated. We cannot operate the world. There's only one world. And that one world is to have a global ethics, a global economy, a global thinking, a global democracy, a global peace. Because when you and I sit down and think of our of tiny nations, what role do we play if we are not in some kind of common spirit, common thinking with the rest of the world? We will be the only one you can think of can do it themselves is things like the United States, because it's big and strong and powerful and military and all that. But it won't last if it doesn't adapt to the world. It's Titanic, and that's where it's going now, because it won't adapt to the world. It wants to control the world. That's outdated thinking. Yeah, but so the metaphor is global ethics, global potentials, utopias, and the power of good idea. Believe in the power of good ideas. You'll see it works.
Yeah, but we need to be also able to do all of that while still disagreeing with each other, because we have this problem that these 8 billion people usually have disagreements of how we should do stuff. So we have to.
And the only thing there to do is dialogue.
Yeah.
It's not domination, it's dialogue. It's to talk about it. And that's a wonderful possibility we now have, because you and I can sit now and talk across the world, right? Yeah, but in Japan, I'm in Sweden, and we have no problem. We can talk with anybody in this world, and we can make new decisions. We could have a new democracy. We could have a democracy. How bizarre that I cannot even elect somebody who represents me in international organizations and my country. I'm voting for a parliament which is having less and less influence on anything in every nation. This is totally behind time.
But so let me just ask you, because in my view, what we need to fight against, what we need to struggle for is a world with less violence. So we won't get rid of it completely, but I think it is realistic to say, like, we want to get to a point where we are not constantly exposed to absolute mass violence. And I think that one is probably attainable if we accept that conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is a normal thing that we can work with.
Exactly.
So how do we get to the point where we don't mass slaughter each other anymore, while still accepting that there's the occasional violence that happens, and we can deal with that on a national level because we have national courts and so on. So what would be the most realistic way of containing mass violence or reducing it to a minimum?
To tell people that violence is only a symptom.
Yeah.
But that is what everybody's obsessed. The media is about it. Politics is about it. Science is addressing it. And what I would say to those people is, did it ever occur to you that in every violence you see, there's an underlying conflict? There's a reason why you have violence. And then we have the primitive theory that's because they are evil people on the other side, but we are not. We are good people. This is bullshit. I mean, come on. So what you do is you look at Ukraine and then you say, pump in more weapons. That's people who are illiterate. Because if you want to solve the problem, you see the symptoms of it is to ask, what is the underlying conflict? And every conflict, Pascal, is not located in you or me. It's located between us. It's a problem that stands between parties who do not know how to deal with it. And then they end up using violence instead of saying things like, let's hire a mediator, let's go to the UN, let's take it to an arbitration, or let's sit down and talk about our problem. I mean, some of the things I'm saying are banal. I'm ashamed of sitting and saying that. Peace and talking to each other is better than killing each other. I'm saying these things seriously as a scholar. And I feel it's incredible that I have to sit and say these things. And that's where we have to say to each other, there are alternatives. I'm hammering this in and again. Don't ever believe that there's no alternative to these things. It is not true. It's a big lie of our civilization.
But the amazing thing is that the cancer of war and the cancer of war logic that makes it possible that we have the symptoms of mass slaughter, like we have it as we have it in Ukraine, and as we might have it on an even larger scale in Europe if we go down the path that we are on right now. The amazing thing is that it manages to use these components in order to escalate itself, right? It feeds on the fact that you have these different sides, and that you have also the idiots, and you have people who don't understand that if they tell you that you are a hopeless pacifist idealist who doesn't understand the world, that itself feeds into the cancer that then makes it grow, right? Yes, that the cancer eliminates the alternatives to itself. So to fight the cancer, we need to fight that kind of fatalism, and actually, as you correctly say, show the alternatives and the little step-by-step alternatives to be taken.
That is when you say fight against something, I say 20% of your time, no more. Spend 80% on the alternatives. This is also a matter of individually balancing. You can look at your channel, Pascal, and say how many of your interviews are about the better world that would be possible and how different people think about it, and how much is something of relating to and discussing what has just happened, so to speak. I mean, these are individual decisions all of us can make. And over my lifetime as a scholar, I've spent more and more time maybe on what people would call unrealistic issues, but I have followed the principle: never, ever criticize anything without coming up with possible solutions or better thoughts that you can say, if you do this, then the criticism will go away. And that means not disarmament of the wrong weapons, a new way of thinking defensive defense coupled to nonviolent defense, etc. It means a reform of the United Nations. It means a new democracy that is global and not national predominantly. All these things I've written about. It's not that difficult. Then you may say that people who think this is unrealistic, this is romantic, this is, he's a good guy, but he's totally, outside the frame. Everybody who wanted to change the world were outside the mainstream. And if we're not outside the mainstream, we're the problem. Ask Gandhi, why did Gandhi never become a member of a party? Because he knew parties was shit. He had the unelected ability to speak at a much higher level and deeper level to the Indian people about liberation. Had he been a member of the party, he would have been sitting where everybody else is sitting today. For instance, I'm vitally against political parties as we know them, but there are other ways you can do it. But I mean, long story short, this question you're back to is, why not? Think up the better world and then say, why not? Only don't kill your good ideas by saying, maybe that cannot be done the next 5 years. No, maybe it cannot be done the next 5 years, but maybe the next 10 years, and then go for it. Instead of killing a good idea because it cannot be implemented right now or very fast or save the world right now. We got to do what the Chinese and others are doing, fortunately, and what all artists are doing. Think long term. Think of the future. Stop talking about just the past, which the West loves to talk about. Every conflict party wants to talk about how he was victimized by history, and the present. There's nothing in all our media, there's nothing but the present. There's no history and there's no future. But devote at least 50% of your time, intellectual and the time you're awake, to think constructively. How could it be instead? That's also a personal. Somebody's got to believe in that idea to push. If we all say, well, that is an unrealistic idea, it cannot be implemented very quickly, we will not solve the problems of the world.
No, the point is, I mean, things did get better. Things actually, I'm critical toward like historians like Steven Pinker and so on who say like, okay, overall everything is much better, but some things are better. I mean, we did. The problem.
Absolutely foolish book. I'm sorry.
The problem with everything is better is if we build everything better and then we have a black swan event and we kill ourselves after all, that's not a positive thing either. But some things are better. I mean, we are at the most prosperous level of humanity in terms of our sheer number on this planet, which is in and of itself creates new problems. But we must recognize that, and we have the potential to go forward. So not all is doom and gloom, but even just like rethinking the way that we conceptualize stuff, right, and how we think of the medicine that can help us. What is the most pragmatic thing that people can do once they're
How do you mean pragmatic thing?
Implementable on their own accord. Like people who like let's imagine we have people who listen to us who say like, okay, fine, I have 2 hours every week that I would like to do something. And one example I have is that I have a friend the one who translates all of my videos, genius from Germany, 66, when he started, said because he retired, and then he said, I want to do something, and it's not enough to just sing Kumbaya on somewhere. And he said, like, let me use my IT skills to start translating videos, and now we translate videos of this and other channels into 10 and more languages. And that's a concrete project. How can people? What's the most pragmatic way of building a concrete project to do something positive?
I think that it has to start with individuals. The only peace movement I actually believe in is billions of individuals who want another world. The moment you're out having, this is our slogan and this here is not our slogan, then you introduce all these problems that will never take off. Secondly, I think small groups are very important. Future workshops discussing how it could be. It's a technology, it's a methodology. You sit down and you do a brainstorm, and you don't say what is good and bad. After you've had the brainstorm, you do a funnel and you begin to talk about more or less realizable things. We could have panel discussions publicly instead of discussing only NATO membership or not NATO membership, discussing alternative defense. And nonviolence, you can have books written about it. You could have white books done in countries with alternative defense instead of believing in the non-substantiated, non-documented, analyzed arguments that the Russians are coming tomorrow. I've heard that for 74 years. I'm slightly tired of that idea. You could have peace education in schools. Or you can build peace into the history of peace instead of just the history of wars. We have histories of wars everywhere. We have war monuments everywhere. We have war museums everywhere. We don't have, well, there are peace museums, but they're very few. You could go into any bookshop and you can't find a book by Gandhi or Luther King, but you can find tons about weapons and military uniforms and warfare and all this. We're a totally militarized culture. And if you don't even begin to think of that and ask, why is that so? Then you have a problem, and then the culture has a problem. But I insist that we should be intelligent enough to see that we also have a museum of peace, and we have books about peace, and we have education about peace, and we put education about peace into economy, into history, into psychology, or whatever. Why don't we have tons of books about human evil? Mm-hmm. Do we have any studies about humans doing good?
Altruism. Yeah, we have a couple of.
I'm not literally meaning not a single book, but the overall research has been about why people are evil from Erich Fromm and onwards. It's excellent work. I'm again saying it's necessary, but not enough.
Yeah,
and that's why I think in big and small things every day, things could change if people get the idea that I must also be constructive. I must also think in terms of solutions, because otherwise somebody else will impose their bad solutions on me.
Okay.
It's a self-defense mechanism to say there are better ways of doing things.
So first thing is think yourself of how to create better solution, or what a better solution would be, like a more healthy way of thinking about the problems we have, not just the problem, but the actual solution. And the second thing to me is to ask yourself, what am I good at? What is my specialty that I am good at, and how could I link that to a project that, in a year, in 2, in 4, in 5, links up to something positive?
Yes. I mean, Pascal, you can take your own idea. Why did you get the idea of doing a channel which has now to 250,000 subscribers? You do it because you're very good at it, but you also do it because you feel it's meaningful and you want to present something that could help people think better. I suppose. I don't know what drives you. You're not getting a millionaire from doing it.
It was also just curiosity, the ability to ask people like you honest questions that I have, and that's it's a nice thing, and we can build on that also, right? You can build out.
I like the word curiosity for 2 reasons. If you're not curious, you cannot make peace. You cannot create peace. And secondly, if you don't keep on being curious through your life, you should stop being curious because you got a PhD or something like that. Then you're intellectually dead very soon. If you're constantly curious about the world, you keep young, intellectually and even physically, I would say. So this word curiosity is very tightly closed and related to very close to the idea of peace. We should be curious about the better world.
And honestly, like just to also bring that back, like some of the best thinkers I've met are often also people without PhDs, just people who are good at bringing things together, right? You don't need a PhD to be a good thinker.
No.
Not at all.
I agree. No. I just mentioned that because we are both scholars and we have PhDs, and we have probably colleagues who are intellectually dead when they were 40.
Unfortunately.
And then you have lovely people like Johan into his 90s. Richard Falk today, who is also a member of our foundation, is I think in 95 this year. They're churning out articles and traveling in the world and speaking because they're deeply engaged and committed, but they're also curious about what can be done.
Ladies and gentlemen, never let anyone tell you that just because you're having a positive idea that doesn't sound realistic, that you should stop thinking the thoughts. The opposite is true. Jan Oberg will write you a certificate that you're doing a good thing.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for a positive talk today, Jan Oberg. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk about these things. Not everybody does give me that. Thanks.